Alright, in this video I'm going to show the process that I use in order to get the artwork from Maya onto the iPhone and a few of the tools that I've written. So here we have a level that I've designed. As you can see, since I'm a programmer, it's horribly made, but it is a level, so there's different objects, meshes. And this right here is the exporter. Originally it was command line, but I also support the UI exporting from within Maya, and you can export zones, you can do animations, everything that you could do in the command line you can do using the plugin that I've written for Maya. And here we're going to export zones, and we're going to do it first in binary format, and things get highlighted depending on what you select. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If you're the artist, you'll select animation and you'll be able to control the frame rate, what starting frame and end frame you want to export. But we're going to do zones. So we'll leave everything as is, check everything. And all you do is just export, and it'll tell you if things export correctly. And if there's an error, it'll also give you that information. You can also export an ASCII format, which is more of a human readable format. And that way, if something goes wrong, you have the ASCII version that you can look through and debug and see what happened. So we can do that too. And if I load it up into Notepad. So this first version is the iPhone optimized version, so it's binary format. And as I mentioned before, there's the ASCII format, which you can look at. And I'll just give a brief description of that. So here it'll tell you I can export different things like spawn points, occluders, instances, mesh instances, etc. And the zone, i.e. this whole chunk here is what I call a zone. It has a global vertex and index buffer. So I don't keep a separate index buffer for each one of these because it's just really wasteful. I'd rather just have one. So that's what you're seeing here, and it's just the position and the texture coordinate. But based on your selections, it will export normals, tangents, and binormals. But for here, it's just positions and the texture coordinates. And here again is the index buffer. Again, a global index buffer for all of the meshes. And here are the meshes. By meshes, I'm referring to each one of these little objects that I'm selecting. So those just have the bounding box, the index into the global vertex and index buffer, and then the material that mesh is using. So there's quite a few of those here. And then finally, if there's enough meshes, which is, I think it's controlled by these two parameters, the minimum AB tree object count. So if you have enough objects, it'll put out a binary tree, and that just sorts the meshes that are in the zone. And I use that during visibility checking to quickly get rid of considering certain sections of the world of the zone. So for instance, if I'm over this in this area, and I'm looking in this direction, that with the tree I can quickly discount all these meshes that are behind the view camera just with one simple check. So that's, it speeds up the visibility determination in the engine. So just to go back, this binary format is actually the same as the ASCII format. It's just in a format that the iPhone would like better. So that's pretty much the exporter for the zones. And I guess someone asked me what I code in. They sent me a message. And it's C++, the same with the exporter. I wrote it in C++. And part of the reason is that's what I know best. And I don't know much about Mel scripting. This could have probably just as easily been done with Mel scripting, but I don't know Mel, so I know C++ much better, so it was easier for me to write that. And I just use Visual Studio 2008 like I'm showing you here. So it's just an MLL, it's just a DLL that is used as a plugin to get the data out of Maya. So that's pretty much what I use to write the exporter and the iPhone game. So once I have this exported, I then have it running in the editor, and I've already made a simple level. So this is again a level, as you can see, horrific texturing, and you know, the geometry is horrible again, because I'm a programmer. I'm not really good at artwork, but it doesn't matter. I'm just using this to test, you know, just to test that the engine is working. So that's pretty much all that matters, that it works. So whether the artwork is, you know, up to par or horrific, it's all the same to the engine. Eventually I'll have an artist that'll make everything nice. But here I'm putting all these zones together, sort of in a line. So that's how I can save memory. I have maybe 10 or 12 zones, and I just repeat the pattern randomly, and I'll add smaller objects to make them one zone different than the next. So it'll give it the illusion that you have a lot of variation in the level, but in actual fact, I only have, say, maybe 10 or 12 chunks that make up the world, and that's how you save memory. So this, let me see. Yeah, this one right here is what I exported here. So if I select everything, that's what got exported, and then this is what's showing up in the engine. And yeah, if you can see, here's the barrels, and in Maya, they're right over here. So that's pretty much what the exporter does. And again, they show up here in the zones. Now, I made this editor so that it was completely customizable by the artist. So once they have the editor, they don't have to talk to me. They can start customizing things, adding things to each of these windows, and even controlling the materials or the way everything gets rendered. They can do their own shaders if they like, and they don't have to talk to me or need me in any capacity to do their work. And that's done again through a text file. If I can find that, where is that? Yeah, the level res file. And for instance, they can give a material directory, and this is saying load all the materials for level 1. And the zone directory is saying load all the zones in this directory, zones / level 1. And what that does is it's loading these zones because that's what's in that directory. So the beauty of that is if they create a new project, they can create a separate res file for that project, and it'll load completely different zones for that level that they're working on. So it'll reduce clutter because they won't have all the zones for all the levels in one tab, and then they'll have to search. They'll have the specific things they need to load for that specific level, and it'll keep things clean. So once I have everything in the editor like this, I guess we'll do I'll do a flyby, because I want to do the flyby to show sort of the whole level, because then you can see it in the iPhone and it'll make sense. Like, it'll show that what is in this editor is what's getting exported and then showing up on the iPhone. I'll show that in a separate video. It'll be essentially running this, and it'll just be scrolling up and down like I'm doing right now. So again, here I have to do a second export of this level, and again it can either be an ASCII or binary format. And the same thing, the binary format is for the iPhone, and the ASCII version is for us humans to look at. If in case there's an error in the binary version, you can go through it and see what happens. So that's pretty much the editor and the level. Again, horribly textured and horribly modeled, because this is all I know. Oh, I guess one other thing I did, each one of these is a separate mesh. Everything's pretty much a separate mesh. And what I wanted to do with that is I want to have lots of draw calls, even though that's inefficient, because I just want to see what I can push on the iPhone just to see, just to get some numbers. And the same with the textures. I'm not using a texture atlas. Essentially, every texture that you're seeing here is a separate texture that's loaded individually, which is it's a no-no on the iPhone. But I sort of want to see what the iPhone is capable of when I render it in such an unoptimized fashion. So the only thing that's pretty much optimized is the visibility determination, and that's using a binary tree, and it cuts down what needs to be, like what the engine needs to consider is visible. And I've designed it in such a way it's cache friendly, so it'll fit in nicely with the iPhone's cache, so it'll be pretty efficient. But that's about it. There's way too many draw calls and way too many render state switches, but that's easy to fix. So once you're done with placing the assets in the editor, you hit export, and again, I'll do it in ASCII first. Zone ASCII, call it zone 1, and you just hit OK. If there's an error, it'll show up in the console window, but usually it's pretty hard to get any errors. And then now I'm just going to do the binary version. So for that, you don't need to select ASCII, so you just hit OK, and it exports. And again, I can load this in the editor. I already did this, so that's why it loaded. So here's the binary version, and level 1.ASCII is the ASCII version. I'll briefly describe it. So each one of these describes the zone. So these are zones, what I'm selecting. And if we go to the Explorer, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 7 zones. So there should be 7 in the ASCII, and there they are, there's 7. And that gives you the idea of why it's good to have the ASCII file. You can debug so much easier any problems as opposed to looking at the binary version, which doesn't make any sense. So I can look through. So each one of these zones just shows the zone resource, which would be these things. These are the zone resources. So the zone resource is what I exported from Maya. This whole thing is the zone resource. So if we go into the editor, that would be the zone1.ascii.zn file. So if I go back, where is that? Yeah. So there's 7 of them. And that's, as you can see, this is how I save memory. For instance, zone 2 is over here, and then it's reused again. And the only thing that I'm saving for this is just the position and the bounding box. And that's how I save memory, because I'm not duplicating this zone. It's just saved in object space somewhere, and I just record where it is in world space, and then I render based on where it is in the world. And again, that's how I save memory and money eventually, because I just need the artist to do 10 or 12 of these zones, and then I can reuse them for the level. And you'll get enough variety where it looks like it's a completely random and varied, when in actuality it isn't. So if I go back, and again, if there's enough zones, the same thing, it'll save a binary tree out, so I can quickly find the zones that are visible, and then for those zones that are visible, I can go into the ZN file and then do another traversal to find the meshes that are visible. And again, you can control when these trees are generated. In some cases, it's not even worth generating, so it won't generate the tree, and then I use different methods in that case to find visibility. But that's pretty much how I export everything for the levels. I have the artist do it in Maya, then either I can export it or the artist can do it. But in either case, you don't need me once this stuff is written. And again, that's why I wrote the editor. I wanted anyone to be able to add to the levels and do their own design. And that's why I have a separate editor. I just can't do this in Maya. I just don't know enough Maya, and there's a lot of it's just a very complex software package. I mean, you can touch pretty much any button, and you really have to know what you're doing when you're fooling around here. So that's why I wrote the editor, so that it gets rid of all those complexities, and I just have just what I need to build the levels and nothing else. And then anyone that is good at level design can use this editor really easily and come up to speed very quickly. It's just drag and drop. Like if I want to add, I can just easily add more zones. There. See, it's very easy to line up. Oh, I didn't line it up properly, but it doesn't matter. What else can you do? You can modify the properties. So I can zero that out if you want. Yeah, there it is. So as you can see, it's very simple. They can also save the editor, and at the same time, if they add more zones later, they can go to that res file and add more things here, or just drop things in that directory actually, and then it'll pick them up automatically, and they can just carry on from where they left off. So it's fairly flexible, but at the same time, it's fairly easy. So I have complexity where I need it, which is more, over here. And then the artist that's knowledgeable with Maya can set things properly, like the units, and just pretty much handle the hairy details, I guess, of exporting the zones. And then the level editor can just concentrate on designing the levels, and doesn't have to be an expert with Maya. He doesn't even have to know where the levels are coming from. He just goes into my tool and then starts dropping zones like I did. So that's pretty much what I have for this first video. In the next video, I'm going to show this level running in Maya, and just so we get the perspective right, I guess I'm gonna do it like this in the iPhone. Pretend the iPhone's on the side. It'll be vertical instead of horizontal like here. But I've done it this way because I want a lot of draw calls to be sent to the iPhone, because I just want to see what the performance is like and what I'm up against. And yeah, I just want some data of what the iPhone will perform like without having the optimizations that I'm going to do later with the renderer. So just look out for the next video, and this level will be running on the iPhone. Thanks, and bye.